We're back, baby! 4 years ago, I made a video called Exploring Champagne Socialism. Champagne socialism being that, insult that people throw at posh pricks like me when we argue for basic working rights. In this video, I go over the history of the term and how it's used today, and I basically make an argument for why I don't think it's very applicable or how it's not a very substantive insult. This video did quite well at the time. It's one of my most viewed on my channel in general, and it was a really fun one to make. But looking back on it, it's bad. Years later, I was watching H Bomber Guy's video on plagiarism, and it made me sort of reflect on a lot of my older content.
Why should we care?
None of my work was ever plagiarized, but I think that it definitely fell into the category of lazy. Specifically in this video in terms of the origins of the term champagne socialism. Ultimately, I explored the subject, but I didn't really get into the meat of the history of it. And I think that's a real shame. There is a really interesting bit of history here, and why shouldn't we explore it? Champagne socialism, the idea that someone with left-wing beliefs is being hypocritical by enjoying the spoils of capitalism, but believing that in and of itself is immoral. It's an insult that doesn't really make a lot of sense, but it's used constantly. So why not truly understand why it's used so much?
Right-wing scum.
Oh, Jeremy Corbyn.
And that's really the goal for today. Consider this video to be the superhero origin story to me 4 years ago. We've seen our tipsy hero try and explain this piece of history and nearly stick the superhero landing. But today, 4 years later, let's really find out. In doing this, I had to make the ultimate sacrifice. I turned off the 4 screens I keep on at all time to make sure that no original thoughts ever develop. I dusted off my old philosophy books, and I decided to, once again, get very drunk on camera. Specifically off of champagne. It's definitely champagne, I promise you. It's definitely not Tesco's finest Prosecco. If you want me to be able to afford champagne for the next video, please subscribe. I'd appreciate it. I haven't made a big video in a while, so, cheers, get in here, and then maybe we can all celebrate our 18th champagne socialist birthday. I don't know. Cheers. In my video 4 years ago, I make specific reference to a book by Alexander Herzen called From the Other Shore. Now, first mistake, this isn't actually a book. It is a collection of essays and dialogues written between 1847 and 1851. Alexander Herzen is an early Russian socialist whose work inspires passion in some and dumbfoundedness in others. He isn't as well known as he perhaps deserves to be. In fact, Russian-British philosopher Isaiah Berlin, in a lecture from the 1950s, which was recorded at the time and then later published, says,
"The figure about whom I propose to talk this time is Alexander Herzen, who really ought to need no introduction. No good biographies of him exist, perhaps for the very good reason that his own autobiography is a great masterpiece. It isn't very widely known in England, and that for no very good reason."
Those of you who might have heard of Alexander Herzen would know him as the founder of the first free revolutionary press, called the Free Russian Press, which he founded whilst he was in exile in the UK from, you guessed it, Russia. As far as I can tell, despite my rather quick Googling back then, this is correct. It appears to be the first usage of the concept champagne socialism, whilst not using the specific phrase. The key quote, which I butchered rather terribly 4 years ago, is as follows. "For it is they, none other, who are dying of hunger, of cold. It is they whose mutterings we hear above us and below us, in garrets and in cellars, whilst we sit on the piano nobile, over pastry and champagne, talking socialism." In contrast to the modern use of the term champagne socialism, Herzen uses the concept as a socialist to criticize other left-wing people who aren't taking enough action. They live in comfort, in a life of luxury, discussing socialist theories, socialist works, whilst never engaging with the world around them and the real suffering that is going on, beyond their ivory tower walls. This description of how Herzen understands the concept of a champagne socialist is correctly how I described his work 4 years ago in my video. However, just like with TikTok brain rot, to understand this, I'm going to need some more context. Herzen is observing people pre-1848 French Revolution, identifying them as, in theory, radical, brave, smart, but not being willing to take their ideas to their logical conclusion. They are not willing to take a leap of faith into the unknown, to destroy what already exists so that they can build up something better. Beneath them, a tidal wave of revolution is building, whilst they, unlike their banquets, remain stale and indifferent to the suffering and building anti-establishment sentiment building around them. In a sense, they are in their own theory bubble, floating above the masses who are suffering beneath them. It's important to keep in mind, to understand Herzen's worldview, that in his mind, revolution is inevitable. It is a natural outcome of the society and world that we have built for ourselves. It is a fact of human existence that the current state of society cannot survive. Human will push us to reject it. All one must do is look out of their window and see the reality of revolution unfolding. It is no accident that Herzen uses the concept of lava to describe revolution, this natural, unstoppable force that threatens to blindly destroy everything that has been built. This revolution is not one of fascism or socialism or religion. It is a blind rejection of the current system. It is one of destruction, without necessarily any sort of replacement in mind. This revolution of destruction for destruction's sake should sound familiar to any of us living in the UK or the US. I mean, after all, what does Donald Trump represent if not a blind rejection to the status quo as it has been for however many years? A blind rejection to inflation, to the cost of living, to, the price of eggs, whilst the Democrats sit around and insist that, the economy is doing well and everything's fine. I mean, Nigel Farage's Reform Party polling proves that gammon pigs can fly as long as they are far right. Many in British society are turning to reform as a means to reject the possibly liberal, more soft right, austerity-driven consensus that our two parties, Labour and the Conservatives, have built for themselves. Look at the current Labour Party. They are offering pretty much nothing different, just a continuation of austerity. The people voted for Labour en masse, or at least in terms of across the country, to reject the Conservatives, and yet the overwhelming sentiment is that they are simply continuing their policies. As the British public faces years of stagnant wages, crumbling public services, trains that don't work, water companies that charge us exorbitant amounts to do no service except dumping crap at our rivers, no wonder there's a drive in the British public to throw caution to the wind and chuck everything out the window and see what happens. And this is what figures like Trump and Farage are so good at. They understand how to capitalize on these growing waves of anger and rejection to the status quo. And in a feat that's far too cool for someone like Nigel Farage, he, Silver Surfer style, jumps on that board and rides this wave of anger to, hopefully not, but possible victory.
Your planet is now marked for death.
A champagne socialist, in this sense, is failing to see what is inevitable and capitalize on this lava building up around them that threatens to swallow their whole world. Herzen, much like every single online person of any political persuasion, directs his anger primarily towards liberals. Of course, he's speaking of liberals in the traditional sense, freedom, equality, liberty, as their core values, as opposed to, Tony Blair. ID cards, I guess, would be his. That's 2 out of the 3. ID cards, war. This is pre-1848 French Revolution, right? So the monarchy has been overthrown. And he speaks of these liberals as seeming satisfied with the work they've done. They've, removed the monarchy, but haven't removed the structures that the monarchy abused and, exploited the masses through. For Herzen, a champagne socialist could be defined as a liberal or a left-wing person who does not go far enough or take any action at all to actualize the values that they purport to hold. This isn't by no means a nature-style photography analysis of the situation, taking snapshots from afar whilst never getting involved. He himself was born into aristocracy. If illegitimately so. I know, it's scandalous. Don't tell Deborah. She'll just go about telling everyone. She's an absolute gossip. She's insatiable. Having been brought up in this sort of, highly educated, highly wealthy background, he was determined to escape what he saw as the stagnation and inaction of his peers. Isaiah Berlin, who I mentioned earlier, in his lecture about Herzen, describes the two fates that would befall these highly educated, wealthy young men. Either they live dull lives on their estates, reading and pontificating over whatever theory catches their eye, or they fall into a violent despair and become self-devouring, neurotic, destructive personalities. That's right, everyone. The Doom Scroll is a tradition going as far back as 1848. It's not new. The left has been doing this since we knew what a left was. It was this, according to Berlin, that drove Herzen to emigrate from Russia in 1847 in order to, and I quote, divert himself towards a life of activity. And, just 1 year later, he wrote the criticism of champagne socialism that we are discussing right now. His determination to escape what he saw as the meandering inaction of his peers gave him this unique insight into this group of privileged people who can't look beyond their liberal sensibilities. Interestingly, however, Herzen doesn't claim to use this concept as an insult. Instead, he feels pity. He sees this lack of awareness as a direct and inevitable result of the material conditions and the luxury around these people. As he puts it, it is a serious matter for a man to part with everything that he has been used to all his life. In classic Marxist or Hegelian fashion, to Herzen, actions are driven entirely by our material reality. As he himself says, he's not a moralist. Nature is merciless. Like the notorious tree, she is at once a mother and a stepmother. She doesn't object to 2/3 of her creatures feeding the other third. Or, to put it into words that I use every day, it is what it is. Herzen's view of these unaware liberals can be described almost like someone who's left a cult. Looking back on the members of the group that he used to be involved in, he doesn't look at them with vengeance or anger. He feels pity. He feels bad for them, understanding why they are trapped in a cage of their own making. One aspect of Herzen's writing that I really enjoy are his comparisons to capitalism as cannibalism. As he explains, for aristocracy is really a more or less civilized form of cannibalism. A savage who eats his prisoner, a landowner who draws an enormous rent from his estate, a manufacturer who grows rich at the expense of his workmen, are mere varieties of this same cannibalism. This would just be a fun and visceral analogy for our economic system, but Herzen takes it even further, saying it is us who allow ourselves to be eaten. In his own words, if one man thinks of himself as a dish and another wants to eat him, let him eat him. They both deserve it. The one to be a man-eater, the other to be his fodder. I'm still leaning out of my green screen. This video is going to be a shit show to edit. When he speaks of these, French liberals from pre-1848, they are satisfied with removing the monarchy, but not with removing the systems and power structures that they ruled with. They don't want to end capitalism. In a sense, they want to slay the current cannibals, but never burn down the slaughterhouse. They see monarchs as the problem, not monarchy. They see capitalists as the evil rather than capitalism. The cannibals rather than cannibalism. This, for Herzen, is the heart of champagne socialism. A false commitment to the values of freedom, fraternity, and equality, content to maintain the world as it is in comfort or even luxury, whilst sitting around and debating its flaws. And there we have it. That is the origins of champagne socialism. A term used to criticize fellow socialists, liberals, left-wing people who aren't doing enough action to engage with and actualize the values they purport to believe. Liberals and communists who fail to see the fire of revolution burning up around them, threatening to burn their fragile champagne tower to the ground. Ooh. Mine's never going down. Mine's never going down. I'm fine. I'm always going to be fine. And boom, video done. That's it. I would recommend everyone go and read Alexander Herzen, not only just from the other shore. His autobiography is meant to be one of the best of the genre. His writing is so engaging. He's funny and it's so easily readable, which was not what I was expecting, having, coming back to sort of philosophy and research after a while. I plan on, diving back into the rest of his work after I finish editing this, so I would highly recommend it. And yeah, that's it. Easy peasy, we're done. Can't take that down now. That can't be right. It looks like there's still quite a lot of video left to go. Why is that there? I mean, we've covered the origins of champagne socialism, but as it was used by a socialist. I mean, today it's mostly used as an insult from right-wing people towards left-wing people. I wonder when the first time it was ever used by a conservative was. Ah! It's time for Eggleston, baby! It's about to get real fucking weird in here. The first literary mention of the specific phrase champagne socialist comes from an American writer, George Carey Eggleston. His novel, Blind Alleys, was published in 1906, roughly 20 years after Herzen first mentioned the concept. Eggleston was undeniably a conservative. How do I know this, you may ask? Well, he was a soldier in the Civil War. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean it was for the Confederacy. He was a Confederate soldier. How much more conservative can you get? So yeah, I think that gives us a somewhat clear image off the bat of the kind of person we're dealing with here. Written as a dialogue, Eggleston gives us a very cultural view of socialism. It's not about freedom, equality, and fraternity. It's far more consumerist. Eggleston speaks through the character of Winifred, which, first of all, if you're going to write a 400-page long shower argument of a novel, at least pick your self-insert character a better name than fucking Winifred. I mean, I'm not listening to anyone who makes a serious argument against left-wing values who's called fucking Winifred. Ah, I see you're making a point about socialism. But don't you see I have already depicted myself as the Chad Winifred, and you as the soy Jessica? I think it was Jessica. I'm going to check that in post. I think it was Jessica. No, like Ruby or something. It's definitely a woman. I even wrote in my script, it says check name. Terrible. Winnie, the anti-socialist poo, draws a distinction between the beer socialist and the champagne socialist. Hold on. I'm not prepared for this part. Give me 1 second. Here we go. All right. There we are. Oh, baby. Oh, yeah. Now we're ready. The passage reads, "While the beer socialist..." Yeah, I'm not doing that whole thing in my American accent. That's terrible. "Why the beer socialist wants everybody to come down to his low standards of living, so that all shall share alike in the world's goods and be alike." This book is terribly written, by the way. It's so bad. "The champagne socialist wants everybody to be equal upon the higher plane that suits him, utterly ignoring the fact that there are not enough champagne, green turtle, and truffles to go around, so that all shall share alike in the world's goods and be alike. A liken and a like in the same sentence. This book is terrible. It was a waste of my time. It's 400 pages long. I'm losing it. Welcome to your brand new BuzzFeed quiz. Which kind of socialist are you? 20 questions to find out if you're the champagne socialist or the beer socialist. Egerson's idea of socialism is rather simplistic. It's the idea that everyone should be given the exact same slice of the pie. It's very similar to that idea of equality of opportunity versus equality of outcome that you see, like dumb fucks like Ben Shapiro and what's his name? Jordan Peterson spout, still to this day.
You say that. I haven't claimed that.
It's this argument that socialists want everyone to have exactly the same thing and that any level of difference needs to be, ironed out and restricted. The beer socialist specifically wants to drag everyone down to their level of living. They want everyone to live on the same sort of breadline Soviets type lifestyle. Whilst the champagne socialist rejects the concept of scarcity and believes that we have enough for everyone to be able to live the life of luxury that they live. However, Egerson's concept of the two types of socialism relies very heavily on a essentialist view of class. When his character, Dr. Hatcher, steps in to congratulate Winifred on her excellent fort, which, first of all, if your book is 400 pages long, maybe cut out the parts where you just pat yourself on the back for how fucking smart your book is. Maybe think about that. That'd be great. If you think about it, he's essentially playing, political dress-up with his little dolls, telling himself how, fucking smart he is. It's quite sad. Dr. Hatcher tells a story of a group of sailors who complained to their captain that the ship's cook was giving them bad meat to eat. On investigation, the captain found that the meat complained of was a choice rib roast from his own table. When he declared the fact, the spokesman of the crew answered, I'm going to try and do a farmer's accent for this. Let's see how this goes. We know that, Captain. And such meat is good enough for a man like you. But we want a meat with a bit of chore in it. That was atrocious. That was awful. That's not seeing the light of day. I don't know if you can be racist to the north of England, but I think that's what that just was. So I'm going to redo that. When he declared the fact, the spokesman of the crew answered, We know that, Captain. And such meat is good enough for a man like you, but we want meat with some chore in it. In Egerson's world, rich people are good and smart, and that's why they like nice cuts of meat. Poor people are dumb and don't deserve higher quality meat, and even if they got it, they wouldn't know how to appreciate it. Poor people, the working class, in their essence, don't deserve or even want higher quality goods, because they simply don't understand how to appreciate them. He paints a picture of the socialists being out of touch with reality, not understanding that inequality is not just ethical, but is in fact natural, and that it should always be the way that it is. This is where we see how, unsurprisingly for an American, Egerton has an incredibly consumerist idea of socialism. It's clear that in order to understand different economic systems, he imagines a burger. Capitalism is when pay for burger. Socialism is when no burger or tiny little bit of burger, so not even good. You may have noticed at this point there is a consistent vein of classism in Egerston's analysis. His character, Dr. Hatcher, further argues, why should a champagne socialist rob them of ragtime and inflict Chopin or Verdi or Wagner upon them, any more than a beer socialist should compel us to give up grand opera and the Boston Symphony concerts and listen to ragtime instead. Ragtime, of course, is a predominantly African-American musical art form that got popular in the late 1890s, early 1900s. Moving past the racist overtones of Egerston's analysis here, the idea of ascribing a predominantly black art form as lesser and for the poors, Egerston's understanding of socialism is clearly one of that everyone should have the exact same thing, no matter how little that is. It's about the equalization of resources, but not even resources, of music, of culture, we should all be forced to have the exact same thing at all times, which is clearly ridiculous. Socialism, the ownership of the means of production by the working class, and the empowerment of the average person, really has nothing to do specifically with what you consume on a day-to-day basis. There's nothing about socialism that would get, me banned from liking Tyler, the Creator, and you banned from liking boring music like, I don't know, Taylor Swift. That's your problem to hold. Go to therapy. As Eggleston puts it, the beer socialists outnumber the champagne socialists 10 or 100 to 1. And upon a popular vote for music to be furnished by the state at the public cost, ragtime would win overwhelmingly every time. Which, of course, we couldn't have. I mean, I think there's something really, important to point out, that this, Confederate soldier, or former Confederate soldier, I don't know at this point, is, his, description of the worst nightmare is that the state funds a black art form. Come on. This is crazy. It's so on the nose. This is, his worst nightmare. I can only assume that Eggleston's sort of rejection of democracy in all its forms as well in this quote comes from that sort of you ever try and arrange to get a takeaway when you're at a small gathering at someone's house or a mini party, and everyone's trying to pick different things, and someone wants tacos, someone wants pizza, someone wants a burger, and it's a nightmare. I mean, truly, if only Eggleston had got himself a food captain. Eggleston's argument is the very definition of a straw man. It's so ridiculous and not based in reality that it's actively hard to argue against. There's so little there. There's so little chore in the meat of his argument that it's hard to write a script to talk about it. It's just stupid. And yet, these concepts that he uses are used today. According to Wikipedia, Eggleston is considered the person who coined the term champagne socialism, which, in a sense, is true. He isn't the first person to invoke the concept. We know that Herzen beat him out to that by, 20 years. Herzen was criticizing overly luxurious liberals whilst Eggleston was still putting down slave uprisings. For legal reasons, I don't know if Eggleston ever put down a slave uprising. I have no evidence for that. That's a joke. I mean, the guy did die 100 years ago, so I think I'm probably safe from libel, but put it in there just in case. We do live in the UK, after all. Despite its baseless and outlandish nature, Eggleston's conception of a champagne socialist is what survived to this day. The idea of the politics of envy, the lefty who doesn't actually care for the interest of working people, all of these are ideas that are used in, especially British politics, constantly. Not just by your right-wing figures, but even by your, centre-right-wing figures like Keir Starmer. This concept of the hypocrisy of enjoying luxury whilst criticizing a system that allows you to enjoy it is so prevalent today. But it comes from an argument that has no basis to support it. Oh, that's good. Speaking of Keir Starmer, even he constantly uses this idea when he speaks about former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn. He talks about him as being, a lefty from the party of protest, not being interested in the concerns of working people. It was even utilized, just this week when the Supreme Court weighed in on the definition of a woman, to restrict trans people from, their basic rights. There was a Labour minister saying finally we're away from the party of protest, people who care about people's real issues. It's this is, if nothing else, a branch off from Eggleston's original idea, his original criticism as left-wing people of being not connected to the average working person without any grounds to support it. Interestingly, Eggleston's use of the term is essentially how I describe the modern use of the term champagne socialism in my original video 4 years ago. It's what I speak about, and I paint a picture of Herzen's term being twisted and manipulated to its modern use. But really, in the West, in America, and then obviously passed over to the UK, this concept has always existed. It just formed in its own right. And if nothing else, it is so fascinating to see that this argument, this analogy that came from someone, who fought, against the end of slavery in the US, has survived so prominently to today. There are endless examples of conservatives painting socialism as this, Soviet communism breadline style life. That's how they scaremonger against any sort of left-wing policy. When we talk about Jeremy Corbyn's policy to have free broadband in the United Kingdom, how was that portrayed on BBC News? It was broadband communism. This concept of, this invocation of terror about a very basic idea is so prevalent today. So really, what is the origin of Champagne socialism? The first iteration of the concept undeniably comes from Herzen, but the way that it's used today, the way that it's thrown at me for reasons I could never understand, clearly comes from Egerton, an insult directed towards socialists as being out of touch with reality, as being hypocritical, as not understanding that there's not enough turtles to go around. Also, side tangent, maybe there would be more turtles, Egerton, if they hadn't been capitalized and sold. Fuck you. I'd love to have some turtle right now, but I can't. I'm stuck with this Tesco's Finest Prosecco because of your terrible economic system. And interestingly enough, of course, we learned that this entire insult comes from a Confederate soldier. What a world. And that has been Exploring Champagne Socialism 2, Electric Boogaloo, A Leftist History. I don't know what my plan is for the title still. I'm thinking Electric Boogaloo is the way to go, but we'll figure that out. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. This was actually a real bit of a deep dive, a little bit of history. I did a lot of reading. I've drank some Prosecco. I've really enjoyed recording this. I'm really excited to edit it and get it published. I haven't been making as much, but if people like this, let me know. I really enjoyed reading Herzen's From the Other Shore. I mentioned his autobiography. If people want it, say in the comments. I'll happily read that and review it as well. He's, a very early Russian socialist, and I think his philosophy will have a lot of interesting things that we can learn today. I mean, look how much we've got out of, just this one chapter of his book, really. But collection of essays and dialogues. Fuck me. But yeah, thank you for watching. Appreciate it. Give me some support, give me some love. Maybe I'll stop being lazy, I'll get off my ass, and I'll start making more stuff. Cheers, guys. Pull up a glass, whether it's alcoholic or non-alcoholic, and to better times. Oh. See you around. Okay, I'm going to pour this in here. Oh my god. That noise is horrendous. I never drink. Definitely champagne. Ignore the fact that this is 18. It's the channel's 18th birthday? Probably not. Don't think so. But here we are. Nature is merciless, like the notorious tree. Nature is merciless, like the notorious tree. Fuck me. And I feel like I look like a sleazy car salesman. I think I give that vibe in general. Maybe it's the Italian in me. You know what I mean? I'm giving kind of sleazeball. I'm liking it. It's a good look for me. I'm probably going to crop so that sometimes my arm will be off screen. So if that annoys you, fuck off. Fuck you. You're here to learn, not to have fun. Having fun was for 4 years ago. This is the educational era. Alright, what the fuck was I talking about?